MSW Media.
All right, everybody, welcome back. I'm honored to be joined today by Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, member of the January 6th Select Committee, and author of Midnight in Washington, How We Almost Lost Our Democracy and Still Could. It's representing California's 28th District, Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
It's an honor to speak with you today. And I have devoured your book. It's absolutely beautifully written, and there's so many poignant moments. And I love that Timothy Schneider had written a blurb on it, it's right here. I've got it right with me. It's my little compendium on tyranny. And so I have a couple of questions for you about some of the things that you discuss in this book. In the very first chapter, you open with the insurrection, and I was hoping you could describe that day.
Well, I had suggested to the Speaker about 6 months before the election that we form a small group of members to try to anticipate all that might go wrong in the election. What happens if the Electoral College is tied? What happens if a state sends 2 slates of electors? What happens if the Vice President during the joint session doesn't do his job? And the Speaker thought that was a very worthwhile project. And so we assembled a small group. We would meet periodically. We would talk with outside lawyers and constitutional experts. We anticipated about 1,000 things that could go wrong, except for the one that did, a violent attack on the Capitol. But as a result of my suggesting this, I was asked by the Speaker to be one of a handful of members to lead the opposition on the House floor on January 6th to the efforts to decertify the results. So I was on the floor, I was making arguments, I was rebutting the Republicans, and I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on outside down the mall. At some point, though, I looked up from my notes and the Speaker was no longer in her chair, which surprised me because I knew from our preparations that she intended to preside for the entire joint session. And then very soon thereafter, 2 Capitol Police officers rushed onto the House floor. They grabbed hold of our number 2, Steny Hoyer, and whisked him off the floor so quickly, I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever seen Steny move that fast. And very soon it became apparent the reason. There were intruders in the building, rioters. Capitol Police were responding but had not been able to contain them. Police told us we needed to get out our gas masks, we needed to be prepared to get down on the ground, and then ultimately we needed to get out of the chamber. What stands out most notably to me is I hung back when we were instructed to evacuate to let other people go first, and a couple of Republicans came up to me and said, "You can't let them see you," meaning the rioters outside who were at this point making their way over to the House side of the chamber. I know these people, one of them said, I can talk my way through these people. You're in a whole different category. And at first I was kind of touched by their evident concern of my safety, but that feeling quickly gave way to another, and that is that if they hadn't been lying about the election, not to mention me over the last 4 years, I wouldn't need to be worried about my security. None of us would. And I remember feeling that after the attack and when we resumed on the floor, just disbelief that after seeing what transpired, Republicans would go right back to where they left off and still try to overturn the election. And I'm even more aghast now, over a year later, that having seen the destructive end that Trump and Trumpism brought our country, they are still running with the same lie that led to that attack to attack our democracy in legislatures all around the 50 states.
Yeah, and you talk about how democracy held, and it barely held, and it's still in peril. And I was working on an op-ed writing this. There were several, I think, strongholds or guardrails that sort of came through for us. The Capitol Police, the courts afterwards. Talk a little bit about, and the scary part is that at each of those guardrails, we came within inches. What what is it like to, I mean, you are, have a long career as a prosecutor and defending the Constitution. What is it like to be in the position where we're so close at so many touch points at losing our democracy? And as I sit across from you here, well, on Zoom, you know a lot more than we know because of your position on the January 6th committee. What is it like to feel that threat and then to have it physically manifest itself at the Capitol that day?
Well, I mean, it's awful, and it's something I never thought I would experience. Not just the attack on the Capitol and the fear of violent effort to stop the transfer of power for the first time in our history, but also, to see the Justice Department, where I served for almost 6 years, become a kind of a criminal defense firm for the president, or worse, used to go after the president's enemies, to wonder, as others did, are they going to turn that apparatus against me? That's the kind of experience you have in the third world, not in what should be the most secure democracy in the world. So those were chilling things, and you're absolutely right. The guardrails came close to failing, and a number of those are under continuing assault. One of the guardrails that held was the House itself. Kevin McCarthy tried to overturn the election in the House. A vast majority of Republicans voted to overturn the presidential election. And if they were to gain control of the House in the midterms, Kevin McCarthy would overturn the presidential election in 2024 if Donald Trump loses. And so that's a guardrail that's very much at risk, and underscores, I think, the importance of making sure that someone of the kind of low character and morals of Kevin McCarthy never goes near the Speaker's office any more than Donald Trump goes near the Oval Office. But, one other guardrail that held was that local and state elections officials, Democrats and Republicans, did their jobs. And one of the takeaways of Trump and his enablers seems to be that if they couldn't get the Secretary of State in Georgia, for example, to find 11,780 votes that don't exist, they're determined to have someone in that job and others around the country who next time will. And even local technocratic elections personnel are being run out of their posts with death threats. So these are the guardrails that are currently under assault that we need to pay attention to. We need to shore up.
Especially the laws now that are passing in the wake of the big lie, not just voter suppression laws, though they fall under that umbrella, but the laws where in certain states they want the state legislature. Because like we were talking about what if nobody gets to 270? Oh, well, then it goes to the House, et cetera, et cetera. And we were thinking of that there were states who wanted to send alternate slates of electors, and we're actively talking about that. And we sort of laughed it off, like, you can't just, overturn the will of the voters and send your own electors. And besides, the laws don't allow that right now, as we've seen from memos to Wisconsin and Arizona back in 2020. But we were like, how go ahead and try to pass that law. I dare you. Go ahead and try to pass a law that says no matter how you vote, we the state legislature, are going to determine who the electors are. Yet they're doing it.
Yep, that's exactly right. And to me, that is the most chilling of all. Mm-hmm. These efforts to disenfranchise people are just pernicious, and a return to the kind of bigotry of Jim Crow of many years ago, a new generation of Jim Crow. But the efforts at election subversion to empower Republican boards and legislatures to essentially overturn the popular will if they don't like what voters do, that is a terrifying attack on the infrastructure of our democracy. They're really taking a page out of Viktor Orban, the wannabe dictator in Hungary's playbook, using the instruments of democracy against itself, not relying the next time on a violent insurrection, but relying on quasi-legal means to diminish our democracy to the point where they can undermine the results of the presidential election. And to me, that is among the most fragile points of our democracy at present.
It's why Putin has been where he is and has been for so long in Russia, because of those small incremental quote unquote legal changes to the way that the government functions that allowed him to maintain power.
And one other point I would add to that, which was really a main takeaway for me, coming out of the first impeachment, certainly true of the second impeachment, and that is having a brilliant constitution is not enough. Having well-framed laws is not enough. Having pernicious laws like they're trying to pass is even worse, of course. But at the end of the day, we are reliant on members of the legislature and of Congress honoring their oath of office, being informed by ideas of right and wrong, and having some devotion to the truth. And if none of those factors are present, if members will just ignore the truth, propagate a big lie or a bunch of small ones, or believe that anything they do that helps perpetuate themselves in power makes it right, then none of it works. And so we're facing, I think, a crisis in which one of America's two great parties has given up being a party of ideas, has given up being a party devoted to democracy, has become a kind of autocratic cult of the former president. And that puts us on a very perilous footing.
Yeah, indeed. And I want to talk more about where they are today versus where they were when you wrote the book, which isn't too far, but definitely farther. I do have to take a quick break, and when I come back, I want to talk about that, and I want to talk a little bit about Russia. So everybody, stick around. We'll be right back. Everyone, welcome back. We are talking with Congressman Adam Schiff, who has just a few minutes before he has to go do some work, which is what we elected him to do. I'm going to go right to the end of my interview. I want to talk to you really quickly about your speech on the well of the Senate, where you said stirringly, by the way, I think this will go down as one of the best speeches in recent history. You said your names will be tied to his with a cord of steel and for all of history. And recently, including today, we are seeing Republicans, like big name Republicans, start to back away from the RNC and Donald Trump and their language about legitimate political discourse. Is this too little, too late?
Well, at the moment, it's still too little. But I hope it is a sign of things to come. We really need the Republican Party to return to being a party of ideology. I hope that people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger represent the future of the Republican Party. We need two healthy parties to make our system work. Over the last several years, we've seen a pretty limitless capacity for Republican members to carry even the dirtiest of Donald Trumpian water. And I would like to think that we're seeing some stirrings of conscience. But sadly, so many of the people that were repelled by the RNC's censure of Cheney and Kinzinger, so many of them are former Republican officials. We need more currently elected officials to speak out, to show some courage. Then I'll feel that we're really on the right path. But we do need good people of conscience in the GOP to speak out in favor of the truth once again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There are a lot of former Republicans speaking out. We need the current ones too. And finally, probably one of the more striking lines that you write in the book is that you say, we do not have the luxury of despair. And when thinking of that and framing it with the length that justice takes and the silence of the Department of Justice, there are growing concerns that the Department of Justice, what's going on at the Department of Justice, and we aren't really clear about what the committee is working with the Department of Justice on. And you have said, you haven't seen any signs of this, and it's very concerning. Has anything changed in that? Any developments in that? How do we move forward, keeping together and holding it together and holding up our institutions, but also having real and reasonable concerns about the length of time the Department of Justice is taking?
I feel pretty confident about what the department is doing vis-a-vis the January 6th insurrectionists and the continuing investigation into how they were organized, funded, etc. The charging of seditious conspiracy, I think, was a very important, serious step. My concerns are principally that the effort to overturn the election had many dimensions. January 6th was only the last and final futile effort, but there were efforts to suborn the Department of Justice to that cause. There was all the frivolous litigation. There were the bogus certificates of electors. There was the former president on the phone with the Secretary of State from Georgia trying to find just the number of votes he needed to win. I think in particular, Georgia merits investigation, and not just by the Fulton County DA. And I see no sign that the Department of Justice is doing that. And that really does concern me. But to conclude where we began, I titled the book Midnight in Washington because midnight is the darkest hour of every day everywhere in the world. But it's also a time of hope because we know that what follows is filled with light. We're going to get through this. As you say, and as I mentioned in the book, we don't have the luxury of despair. What gives me optimism about the future is the fact that there are so many millions and millions of Americans all over the country in every state who love and cherish our democracy and far outnumber those who are at the moment trying to tear it down. So we will get through this, but what we do in this moment will determine how quickly we get through it or how much damage we have to suffer along the way. So we all need to be engaged right now. We can all play a role. As the speaker likes to say, know your own power. And we all have the power in our own circles to make a difference right now in the life of our country.
Yes, I agree. I don't think we should wait around for one person to save us. It's up to all of us to do that. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you for your time. Everyone, you can buy Midnight in Washington wherever you get your books. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And if your listeners read as part of a book group, let me know. I've been enjoying popping in on some Zoom book club meetings. So would love to do that.
Excellent. I'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
You bet. You take care.
Everybody stick around. We'll be right back.